Good morning, everyone. Thank you for spending an hour and a half with me today to talk about my favorite subject, business insurance. Um, so I've been doing this webinar, been partnering with the city of Chicago for, I think, about 7 years now. Helped hundreds of business owners like yourselves that are, exploring the option of being an entrepreneur, and insurance is basically your lifesaver of making sure your business is profitable. So I get really excited about sharing the back end and all the preparation of what insurance is all about. So that way my clients and our business owners can maintain healthy profitable businesses and be around, and create a legacy for your families. So with that, I want to just talk a little bit about myself first, so you can kind of get an idea of who I am. I'm a local Chicago resident. I've been born and raised in Chicago. I have 3 offices in the Chicagoland area, including a Burridge location in the suburbs. And earlier this year, I opened up another practice in Arizona. So we are helping clients in brick and mortar locations in Arizona, but also are licensed in the other states that are listed on the screen here. So over the years, there are different types of insurance agents, but it takes a specialist to really understand business insurance. It's not the same as just going to call your person that does your car insurance. Having a specialist on your team, it's so important. When I started my business 28 years ago, I early on made sure that I knew what I knew. And then when I didn't know something, I looked for the best to help me. So I found the best attorney, the best accountant, and they partnered with me. So that way, things that I didn't know about with the accounting and things like that, I used those resources. So I leaned on that. So here to tell you that you got to lean on your insurance provider to make sure that you are well protected, spending the appropriate amount for what your business revenue generates, and just know that your business policy that you may start with should change and grow with your growing business. So I always say we don't want to be insurance poor, but we don't want to not know something just because you just bought a generic policy and then you didn't know, you assumed you had the coverage. So that's what this is intended for, is to just educate you on a high level of what all these other options are when somebody says, I just want insurance for my business, my liability insurance. It's so much more than that. So, lean on me as a specialist, and if you need some advice. We also complement a business owner's not only business insurance, but we help them protect their assets, and we help them build wealth by creating retirement planning and health insurance and things like that. That all the hats that a business owner has to wear, you now have to think about all those things, whether you're a one-man business, one-person business, or you're going to, your vision is going to have a team of 50 people. All of those things are part of a foundational, when you're doing your business plan and whatnot. So I always start with what is business insurance, and insurance in general. It's all about managing risk. When you talk about insurance, all we're doing as a consumer, whether it's personal homeowners insurance or auto or business insurance, we are transferring risk from one person or entity to the insurance company, because when things happen, they could be a catastrophic, and on a large scale, it can devastate a business's financials. So when you buy insurance, that premium ensures that I limited my risk to my deductible or to my out-of-pocket expense or whatever that premium is. So it's just a tool that allows you to manage your risk and transfer that risk to the insurance company rather than holding all that in your own responsibilities. So small businesses typically when they think about what they're insuring against, fire, theft, you see people having floods, businesses, we've seen a lot on the news in Florida, hurricanes, they're devastating to business owners. And if you don't have the right insurance, those people, tend to close up and file bankruptcy and whatnot. You also have a legal liability and a responsibility that if you have people coming into your facility or your office, or you're doing services for somebody, you have a liability responsibility to make sure that you're not causing harm to somebody else. auto accidents, people die and all the, obviously all the time, but there's insurance that protects businesses against the death of a key person or the death of the owner. So that way the business can go on and on. So we'll take a deeper dive into each of these categories, but just know that we're kind of building the layer of things to think about when you're talking about business insurance. So when does somebody need to buy insurance? So the time that you need to buy insurance is, I always say that if you enter into a lease with lease with somebody, so you're signing a legal document that you are required. Every business lease has their insurance requirements. So you tab over to the insurance the insurance information, and it'll tell you typically need $1 million general liability, you need workers' comp, and it'll give you the list of landlord requirements. So that's one key giveaway. Another key information when you need to get business insurance is when you have employees, whether they're 1099 or W-2, you're entering into some liability that you're exposed to. So that's a key mind to say, I need to get insurance. And the third time is when you enter into agreements with an end user. So when you exchange a good for a service, or you're giving advice, or you're doing, event planning, you're exchanging, you have a customer there. When you have that customer, that's when you need to determine that it's time you're adding risk to your situation. So it's time to add insurance to your portfolio. So why do you need business insurance? Again, we talked about transferring risk. Most people like myself that started out our businesses, we don't have millions and millions of dollars to just be at risk for. And even if we did, we certainly don't want to lose that from somebody suing us. So whether you have money or don't have money, we don't want to take that kind of risk. It's already risky enough for us to leave our day job, secured income, and then doing what you dream about doing or a passion that you're doing, and then have that risk of it, ruining the rest of your life, taking your life savings, hurting your family because of lawsuits or things like that. So we just want to, basically, when you open a business, you just want to limit your risk. You're already taking so much risk by doing this adventure, or this venture for yourselves. So you always buy the best insurance that premium can buy and what you can afford. Know that premiums are tax deductible as a business expense. So reasonable and customary are what the words an accountant will use to be able to write off your expenses. So whenever I look at what I'm spending on anything in my business, whether it's insurance or anything else, marketing, I just, in my mind, if I'm spending $1,000, I deduct in my head 30%, because I know that that's a tax deduction, roughly. I know that I'm not an accountant, so I'm just saying in my mind, I net that out and say, okay, that's really $700-800 of true expense, because that expense gets taken off of the top of your revenue. So it is a tax deduction. Which gets right into the next slide. So yes, of course, they're tax deductible, but they are have to be ordinary and customary. So you can't just buy a policy that is not necessary for your business just because you want to take a write-off. It has to consider, and according to the IRS, it has to be an ordinary expense, a necessary expense. It has to be part of and complement of the need for the type of business that you have. And I know there's going to be a ton of questions at the end. So just as you think of questions, you can start chatting them in, and then we'll go through them, one by one. Okay. So again, remember I was telling at the beginning that when people think about insurance for their business, they think of liability insurance. I need liability insurance, but all what I listed here are not even everything. So there isn't so many insurance policies that you can add and layer and consider when it's time to think about business insurance. Some of them are going to be not applicable to you, and some of them are going to be, oh, I didn't know that wasn't part of this, or I'll table that until when I make more money, or so on and so forth. But again, when we're searching for insurance, there's really not a class that you could take unless you're sitting in and listening to this, or you find an advisor that spends an hour and goes through the different types of policies that you can look at. But so just kind of highlighted, the general liability is kind of the foundation. Professional liability, if you're entering into services that you provide services for, we'll talk deeper into that. business life insurance, different from your personal life insurance that you might have at, with your family. There's commercial auto policies versus your personal auto policies. When do you switch from personal to business? We'll talk about property insurance, workers' comp, and the list goes on here, depending on who needs what. But so that's what we would spend time with, identifying. And obviously, everything has an expense. Some things are not expensive, some things are more of an investment. So once you are well informed about what is important to you and what is the most risk for you, then you can build and customize a business plan that actually feels good and you feel safe and protected and it fits in your budget. Okay, so this is a big one because a lot of people are driving around their personal auto policy, but they have a business. And so there are exclusions in every auto policy that's written on personal paper. So if you bought a farmer's policy and it's a personal auto and it's a 2020 Hyundai Sonata, and you take that and you're doing deliveries with it, it's not covered under your personal auto policy. So, because their deliveries are specifically excluded. So if and when you've got that situation where you're driving from point A to point B and it's not the same place every day, that's a trigger that might be business use. If you're doing deliveries, that's a trigger that it's going to be commercial use versus just my personal auto for business use. If you're letting other people drive your car for business use, that would trigger commercial insurance. So it is very different when employees drive your cars or employees take their own cars on behalf of you. That's when you need to expand that personal auto policy to either business auto, which would be rating your personal auto rated for business use, not driving to and from work, or you change it over to a commercial policy, which then is more robust and has less exclusions. It covers other drivers that employees that need to drive your car and whatnot. So there are situations where you might need to upgrade your personal auto policy. Which one's most expensive? The commercial one, of course, because anytime you have less restrictions, it gets more expensive. So your personal auto policy is the cheapest. And then when you rate your personal auto rated business use, then it's a little more expensive. And then when you rate that business auto policy traded into a commercial policy, that's the most expensive. It has higher limits of coverage. It has broader protection. It typically is $1 million policy versus, 100,000 or 50,000, whatever you have in your personal auto policy. So it's an apple and an orange when it comes down to it. But the key is to be informed. Another key coverage that is on a business policy, a commercial policy, I should say, rather than a personal auto, is this hired and non-owned auto liability, which means that if I have my employee run an errand to the bank for me and on business time, and he takes his car or her car and runs it to the bank, and on the way to the bank there's a head-on collision, regardless of fault, the business owner is going to get sued regardless of fault. If you have just a personal auto policy, like if the person had a personal auto policy, that's not going to protect him. They're going to go after the business owner because it was on company time and it was a company errand. So if I have this coverage called hired and non-owned auto on my commercial policy, my business policy, my business is protected against that claim. So the way to work around that, don't have people drive their cars for your purpose, or buy the right coverage if that's going to be a situation that you're going to be in. Okay, so business life insurance is also called key life insurance when you're talking about it with professionals. It's interesting because I love the fact that you can leverage in life insurance when you're looking for loans. And you may be able to get qualified on a loan that may have been questionable in the past based on whether it's your debt to income is short or the credit's a little bit short. I've seen loans get approved with this being as a contingency that will approve you if you get a $250,000 life insurance policy on the key person, on the owner. And if you do that, then there's stipulation that the loan may qualify you. I love that you can use these for leverage, again, expanding your business or just having it in case you need to, in case something happens to you. Obviously, if something happens to you, then the business can continue on. It can pass on to your heirs and for continuity purposes. Maybe your partner or your children don't want to have this business, but the business had a ton of debt. And so the insurance can pay off debt. It can pay employees until you sell the business or liquidate, things like that. So it can do a lot of things. And then when the debt is clear, or when that loan is satisfied, then you can then transfer it back to family. So the insurance policy never goes unused. So if the business gets closed, that our business life policy then transfers to it becomes a personal one if we need to. So it's got some flexibility in there. Builds cash value. These policies for executive bonus plans, we call these plans golden handcuffs. So if you have a key person, like let's say you opened a restaurant and your chef is, that person is that behind the scenes makes your business humming. If something happened to that key person, like that chef, their insurance policy can be on, so that way the business gets taken care of. And then it becomes an executive bonus plan, all tax deferred. So lots of benefits for it. It also provides liquidity, right? Because life insurance is instant cash, very affordable. Stockholder life insurance is also common if you're in a larger business where you're a corporation, and you can use it for buy-sell agreements. If you are entering into a partnership agreement with somebody and you have a buy-sell agreement, then life insurance is purchased on each other as partners. So that way, should something happen to one of the partners, there's money to pay off the other person's estate, the other person's partner. So lots of things that are, really a new concept. If you're new to learning about insurance and business insurance, these are great strategies that we work with your accounting department, and we work with them to build plans so that way you can expand if you need to, and you can cover your family if you need to, and you can protect a buy-sell and a partnership agreement. And then this partnership life, going on to that, very common that people go into partnerships with friends or family or just anybody, coworker. If you enter into that agreement and then a death happens from somebody, or a disability, if for that matter, you then become partner with their children or that person's spouse or partner. And maybe that person is not as knowledgeable as the original partner, like that wasn't the deal that you agreed with. So I love that you can have that buyout feature, so that way you don't have to be stressed out of becoming a partner with somebody that doesn't know anything about your business. And now you're 50-50 owner with a stranger that is just going to take is just going to water down your business's value. So I love that you can just exit that original partnership by buying out that deceased partner's heirs, if that makes sense. Okay, general liability. So this is that common, phrase that you'll hear. What is general liability? That is your foundation insurance policy. Somebody gets hurt while in your care. If somebody slips and falls while they're in your facility. If somebody eats something at your restaurant and they get hurt, that's a certain type of liability. There are things that general liability covers, not only just the injuries, but it covers and protects you against the lawsuits. So the legal fees, it pays for your attorney fees, your court costs. It covers contractual liability. Then there's advertising injury. All of those things are under the umbrella of general liability, and you buy them. So somebody that makes soaps, facial soaps, and they're making it, and then that person, somebody that used it, may have gotten a rash or something happened, there was a breakout and there's a lawsuit that goes on, that's product liability, versus premises liability is that slip and fall on your property. So there's different types of liability situations, but your lease is going to give you a baseline of what you need. I haven't seen anything less than $1 million on a lease requirement, and I've seen, up to 10 million on an umbrella needing, extra coverage depending on the type of risk. Know that your lease is a pretty standard lease. So if you're working with an attorney that's helping you understand it and read it, I've seen leases get renegotiated with insurance. So depending on, they might want $5 million of umbrella, which is going to cost you $8,000, let's say, you may negotiate down to $1 million, again, depending. It's obviously something to consider, but know that it can be negotiated. And your attorney should give you that advice as well. An additional insured. Landlords will want to be additional insureds. Third parties want to be additional insureds. If you're entering into an agreement with a vendor and you're taking on their goods and services, you'll want to be an additional insured. So it protects that person that has this relationship, whether it's a vendor to a consumer, or you're doing roofing for somebody and you're the homeowner, or the city of Chicago asks to be an additional insured when they do the Taste of Chicago, let's say. So all those restaurants that take those booths, the city of Chicago is an additional insured on every person, every company's business for that event. Because if somebody sues that restaurant owner while they're at that booth at the city of Chicago's Taste of Chicago, everybody gets sued. The business owner, the city of Chicago, the park district, anybody that if there's an injury and it's serious, everybody is involved in that lawsuit. And then you all have to pay for that defense. So when I put somebody as an additional insured on my customer's policy and a claim happens, that person that I listed is treated the same as the primary insured. So they get that same $1 million benefit or whatever I have listed. That additional insured is the same protection as the main client. Sometimes additional insureds cost money. Sometimes they don't. Our policies don't charge for additional insureds, but if we have to go with a different broker and we have to write a policy that Farmers doesn't write, for example, I've seen the additional insureds as high as $100 per additional insured. You can also buy what they call blanket additional insured. So if you're doing a lot of additional insureds, your businesses require a lot of certificates, then you can buy like what they call a blanket additional insured, which for $500, you get unlimited additional insurance throughout the year. And so sometimes that becomes a better deal than paying $100 each time. So it's very important when you are the customer and you're hiring somebody to do work for you, ask for a certificate of insurance and make sure that you're listed as the additional insured. So that way you're protected against that company's negligence should something happen. Professional liability. Professional liability takes on a couple different names. So they call it E&O, errors and omissions, professional liability. So this is for individuals or companies that provide services as their main business. So like me, for example, I provide insurance advice and I give services based on my insurance knowledge. If I put somebody in harm's way, or I forget to add a vehicle that a customer needed, or something happened and I didn't do something for my customer, I'm responsible for that omission, for forgetting to do something, or for making an error. So we have insurance for our professions. So accountants, attorneys, doctors, insurance agents, right? And realtors, anybody that's giving advice, coaches, IT consultants, whenever you're considered that you're giving advice, now you need professional liability to make sure that if you are accused of something, it's like malpractice for your business, right? If you're accused of doing something or failing to perform, which causes either injury or harm, whether it's physical or financial, then that professional liability would protect you against that lawsuit up to that limit that you purchased, typically in $1 million increments. Crime insurance is when an employee, it's also known as fidelity. I love that insurance companies have different words for different things. So you might see it on your lease as crime. It might be employee dishonesty. It might also be hidden under fidelity coverage. But basically, if an employee is stealing money from our customer, the business owner, and there's proof of that, then you can buy insurance that protects that. If you're in a high cash business and you have let's say $5,000, $10,000 of cash on hand, then and an employee steals from you, then it falls under crime insurance or employee dishonesty. So it covers for theft in regards to money on hand and theft of premises. Cyber has become very, very important lately. People are getting hacked like crazy. So now 1 in 4 1 in 4 claims for insurance companies are related to some type of cyber threat. So what cyber liability covers is that cost to restore your business to its original state. It also pays to put that customer that was exposed to an original state. It covers claims against viruses that you might get, theft, extortion, things like that. It's just a plethora of things that cyber can extend against. The more you are dealing with online and people's credit cards and social security numbers, the more expensive a cyber policy can get. So just think about that as the risk. So a hospital that has people's social security numbers and business or credit cards, that's a very expensive policy in comparison to, let's say, a hot dog stand that, just people are paying cash and there's not a lot of exchange of personal data, people's personal information. So that cyber policy might be a few $100s versus somebody with high risk might be a couple $1,000s for that same policy. So it depends on the type of business you have, the type of risk that you're involved with, the number of employees that you have, how many computer stations and things like that. And that's how we calculate the rate of it. So it's not like a flat dollar amount. It's more of application based on potential risk of your business being exposed to cyber claims. Okay, property insurance. Property insurance is everything that is inside your business. It's your inventory, it's your personal property, your computers, your desks. If you have a clothing store, it's all that clothing. If you have a restaurant and it's all the food, that's your property. It's called contents, business property. So everything that you would, I guess, take with you if you sold the property, the business, or it recycles through as far as inventory goes, that's considered property coverage, business property. Typical policies will cover vandalism, fire, theft, flood insurance. You've got to have flood policy to have your contents covered for flood. Most of Chicago is not in a flood zone, it's in a flood zone X, so it's not required to carry it. But there are other words that people use for flood. So if you have a lower level, you can buy backup of sewer coverage on your business policy, similar to somebody's homeowner's policy. So if the basement floods and you've got contents down there, you can have additional coverages, so you can add on. When you have a claim that has property affected, so there's a fire, let's say, and your property gets affected, your business interruption, business income, if you have that coverage, gets triggered. So if you're unable to operate your business because of this claim, then, and your business generates $5,000 a day in revenue, then business interruption kicks in and we pay for that lost revenue based on how your policy is, what coverage you have. So you have to buy that coverage if it's not already included in your package. So that's important because you might suffer a loss of, let's say, $10,000 of equipment or personal belongings that are in your unit after a theft or a break-in. But then you also now don't have any inventory to sell, so your business is shut down. So kind of triggers two types of coverages. One event, two types of coverages. You might have one and not the other, and you might not have enough coverage. So think about that when you're talking about like, what's my deductible? People, if they self-insure or aren't aware, they could then think they have $1,000 deductible, but then in reality, they might have $5,000 a day deductible because their business doesn't have business income coverage, that business interruption coverage. So that's why it's so important to really understand all these different, factors of what creates a true business policy. And they all should be customized, for the most part. They all should be customized to fit somebody's, because unless you're a franchise, you don't have a cookie cutter business. Franchises do. And those franchise owners tell you what they need you to have to make sure that there is no shortage of coverage. Small business workers' comp is required by the state of Illinois. So what happens with workers' comp is that it not only covers your employees against getting hurt while they're in your care and control, it also covers third-party lawsuits. And an example of a third-party lawsuit is is, let's say you are, removing asbestos. That's your business. You remove asbestos from your, that's your type of work you do. And you come home and you take off your hazmat suit and then your spouse puts it in the wash for you. And then in that interaction, that spouse breathes in that air and gets lung problems from that. That spouse was not an employee of that business, but indirectly they were hurt because of your business that caused that. So every workers' comp policy in our state has third-party lawsuit coverage, and it's line itemed out in that policy. But interesting enough, if you've ever seen a workers' comp policy, the highest you can buy is $1 million of coverage. But there is no dollar limit in the state of Illinois for medical treatment and medical bills. So it's really an open checkbook. Should somebody get killed on the job, one of your employees gets killed or disabled, those bills can be racked up and can be very, very expensive. So it's so important to carry workers' compensation for the reason of that you're not protected by that small business. You can't file bankruptcy against that. In our state, you're personally liable for people's injuries. Even if you don't have insurance, you are held personally liable for them. So it is, and because it's regardless of fault, you don't have to be negligent. It just has to happen. It's such an open risk for our customers to have. And even if you have volunteers, they can get hurt. 1099 people are considered your employee-employer relationship. You can get out of having workers' comp if every 1099 person you hire carries their own insurance, but are you checking that? And what if they don't have it and things like that? So because there's no corporate protection, if you can't file bankruptcy, it's such a huge risk, and it's for the most part affordable considering what is at risk. I would advise you to go to this website, jot it down, and I know they'll, give you this information also on the portal, but this is the website to help you answer all the questions you'll need to know of when you should buy the workers' comp, is family considered an employee, W-1099 versus W-2, you're a one-person business, do you need workers' comp? There's exclusions exemptions, I should say, when you don't need to have the workers' comp, but workers' comp carries a $500 a day fine if you don't have it in your business that requires it. And the money that is collected, the Workers' Compensation Commission collects that money, those fines, and they help pay victims of people that were uninsured. So it's a real thing. I don't know how much they police that, but it's a risk if you have a business with employees, and definition of employees can be 1099. You run a risk of potentially having a $500 a day fine from the day you were incorporated or formed your LLC. So it's like $250,000 a year potential maximum to have that fine. In my 28 years of doing this, I had one business owner had to go to court and was found guilty of not having the workers' comp when they needed it. So it's only one out of thousands, but it was not a good feeling for that customer that refused to purchase the insurance when it was advised. So with that, it's just know the law, know what your responsibilities are, and get the right protection. EPLI stands for Employment Practices Liability Insurance, and that is another growing claims of lawsuits. So this is the coverage, and it's not on every policy, it's not automatic. So this is, if you're concerned, it covers wrongful termination from employee to employer. It covers sexual harassment, discrimination. We're an at-will state, an at-will employer state. So that means I can hire whoever I want. I don't have to give a reason, but anybody can file a complaint against anybody, right? It's their freedom. And there's a department in the state of Illinois that handles those types of complaints. and they investigate them. And, if there's nothing wrong, then there's nothing wrong. But if they do find something, some negligence, and find the employer at fault or negligent, then this employment practices liability policy pays for the business owner's legal fees and the defense in a settlement if necessary. So 40% of our claims that are filed against the employment practices are with small businesses. So it is common. I just think it's becoming almost a mandatory thing, in my opinion, because you just don't know. And sometimes it's harmless thoughts, but crossing lines of what is correct and what is not correct in the eyes of the law. And you're also responsible for another coworker offending another coworker. So you as the business owner may not have done anything, but an employee may have offended another employee, and that's your responsibility. They're on your watch and so, there's responsibilities that are beyond what you will do and won't do. And it goes above and beyond that. So just know that it's sometimes bigger than what we can imagine, because 99% of us are, honest, ethical, try to do the right thing, be fair to your employees, but then do you have to be careful of everybody else around you and your surroundings, and you're ultimately responsible. So as you know, if you get the idea and the theme of what we're talking about, a business owner carries so much responsibility and risk. We have so much risk, and it's already hard enough to be profitable and do this, but see how many areas that become out of your control almost, and could be held responsible for an unintentional act or an act of somebody else. And so it just gets scary. We see a lot of these claims, and they're stressful. You spend $5,000-$10,000 just to talk to an attorney about it, just to find out if you even are, what's going on with it. And that's a soft number, because it's serious. Commercial umbrella, very similar to if you have a personal umbrella, it's an extra layer of protection above the business. It carries over all of your other products. So if you have commercial auto, it extends over. If you have general liability, it will carry over. It carries over the workers' compensation. So it's another layer where it's needed. Also, when you buy a commercial umbrella, it broadens the exclusions, because every policy has probably more exclusions than coverages, it seems. And so it broadens that exclusion. So there's likely, if something is not covered under a general liability policy or another policy, it can get picked up under an umbrella policy. So it's important to have. A lot of leases show it, again, negotiable if you needed to see that. I am obviously on the other side of things, where I see claims more than good stories. I see the claims because that's what they call me for. And so I'm on the side of caution, and by every policy should have an umbrella accompanied with it. Again, of course, if you can afford to cut something else, but it's so important, because what we don't know lurking behind can become, a peace of mind for us having the right insurance and just having an extra layer of protection. Okay. Okay, a surety bond. Surety bonds are intended mostly for contractors, and they're bonds, and the purpose of a bond is to, if you fail to complete the job, if you fail to finish the work, but you got paid, the bond can get called. So the bond might be for 10,000 or 25,000, or it's a performance bond, things like that, where contractors are making a commitment to completing work, but then they don't complete it, and they skip town, or things happen all the time. And so when a business says they're bonded, that means that the contract work is pretty much guaranteed, that if they skip town or don't complete the work, they took your down payment and then they never came back, that you could call on the bond to make the customer whole again. So they're typically inexpensive, but large bonds, again, performance bonds, the more risky, they could tend to be, 3% of the bond's note value. So if you have a $500,000 bond requirement, it could be up to $15,000 to buy a bond on that high risk type of thing. So they can go from $100 to, as high as 3% of the bond value. So, So they're definitely case by case. The city of Chicago does require being bonded, and then small villages, if you're doing work, when you go get a permit, the bond is required as well. And those are typically for contractors, and they're not expensive for the most part. Loss control is not a coverage, it's actually a benefit. And loss control is the insurance company's way of helping contain a risk, your business's risk. So we pay for the company to go out and visit your site. In exchange, you have to agree to doing this. So when you sign the contracts that we're going to give you this insurance, we might do an inspection, we might have loss control come out. If we feel the need, you have to let the loss control people in. So sometimes it's stressful because they find things that is going to cost you money to fix or correct. But I look at it as like, please come in and make my facility safe, a safe place to work, a safe place for my employees and customers to feel that it's a safe place. Most of the time we tell them about, slip and fall preventions, safe handling of knives in the kitchen if you're dealing with that. We look for, steps, to making sure the steps are properly with rails and that there's no chips and things like that. So it's really is a good thing. Again, thinking of it as a partnership. We all want to have a safe environment. The safer your business is, the less likely you're going to have claims. And the more likely the insurance company over time is going to see that you are a good risk and not a risky business. And then you can earn credits on your policies at least after 3 years, then you can earn some discounts if you're claim free. So we also help with your handbooks. There's a lot that a loss control company and vendor can do. We provide continuing education for your teams. Again, we do the slip and falls. It's just a good thing, but it can be stressful for a business owner because when we do come out and we do an inspection and, you might not have emergency lighting or things might be not up to code, we will require those to be brought up to code pretty quickly. And otherwise you could risk being canceled. So those are things that, again, it's mostly good, but I can understand that sometimes it can be a stressful environment, especially if it's cost money on top of the premium you just paid. And now they, slap you with $1,000 bill to go get your fire extinguishers recharged because you didn't know. But it's also, thank God that they caught it. So I look at it as on the bright side. And then let's go on to the next slide. Liquor liability. Liquor liability, obviously, if you're selling liquor, if you're serving liquor, you'll need liquor liability to do that. If you're collecting money for liquor in exchange, obviously. It's also called dram shop insurance. Again, they like to interchange. Dram shop insurance is also known as liquor insurance. But if let's say you are me and you host an event for your holiday party and I bring in, I have liquor at my Christmas party. If I have coverage that's called host liquor liability, on most policies they have them, not every policy has it, that gives me coverage for free built into that plan I already have, that if I host an event, it's not in the course of my business. I sell insurance, I don't sell liquor, but I'm hosting an event, and should one of my guests get in a car accident having too many drinks and I'm responsible for it, my business policy would come into play, even though I don't have a liquor liability policy. I have what's called host liquor. So it's that occasional situation where you engage in an activity that may involve liquor, but you are still responsible for it. So you want to make sure, if you are doing those types of events and it's not your practice, that you're not a restaurant owner that has liquor insurance, that you double check and make sure you have the right insurance. And versus dram shop insurance is for bars, restaurants, bartenders where alcohol is being sold. You do need that to get coverage for that. So, and people do sue people for car accidents and getting, having people intoxicated while driving is not okay. There are classes that you have to take if you do need liquor insurance. You have to complete safety courses for the state, and so to make sure that there's cut off patrons if they don't, if there's too many drinks being served. Happy hour type of things are higher risk of of creating Dram Shop need. So, so there are people and companies that help you make sure that you are in compliance with serving alcohol. Human resources benefits, this is all ancillary to that business insurance. You know, I think of a business owner as all of these hats. So when I was working as an employee for, Deloitte company, they provided me all of these benefits in my employee package. When I leave that company, I may lose all of those policies, or I may only have it for a short period of time. Like Cobra, I can buy for 18 months, but eventually I'm going to need my own insurance. So these are, we have a whole department that helps clients for human resources, benefits, disability, all of those things that are, whether you need them individually as a one-person operation or small group needs. Currently, right now, it is open enrollment for group health and for individual health. So if you do need insurance, now is a time where open enrollment is going on. It typically goes to December 15th for group insurance and January 15th for individual. But if you need help on that, if you may qualify for subsidy, there's assistance, financial aid assistance for people that may qualify for that. And so we can help you through those questions as well. So these are just some of the highlights that I think are the most important when you are entering into this big decision. Have mixed feelings of happy, scared, opening a business. Passion and love is driving you to open this business, and I applaud you for pursuing those dreams because it's so risky. But if you let insurance take care of the other risk that's unknown, it does take half of that burden away from you. And I'd rather pay monthly on something than have huge expenses of the unknown down the road. And so with that, I'm going to open it up to questions. I'll leave these phone numbers up. These are my contact numbers. Best place to I'm extremely busy, so the best way to reach me is email. But if you do call one of the offices, just make an appointment. If you do have on the side questions, I'm happy to answer for you. Just book an appointment and I'm happy to give you advice. And I see lots of questions coming in. So I think I'll open up the chat and start at the top and then keep bringing questions in until we run out of time. I think we have about 45 minutes at least. So that's good. Okay. So let's see. I don't want to stop let me go back to this and read my chat here. Okay. Oh my goodness. Too big. Okay. I'm an AI assistant helping Georgetta Davis take notes for this meeting. Follow along. Okay, so that's a transcript. Okay, so let's keep reading. Sorry, is there when questions are accepted, I'd like to know.
Yeah, there's questions here.
Okay, so is this when questions are accepted, I'd like to know what insurance a marketing business. I'd like to know what insurance a marketing business would need to host a business expo. Next year, I'd like to have the right insurance into it. Okay, so that's perfect. So like a business expo, you're doing your marketing business. You remember, always think you need general liability whenever you're going into you're doing an expo at maybe here. You need general liability, and then whatever you're marketing, whatever you're selling, if you're selling a service, you're going to need that professional liability. If you're doing marketing and you're posting things online, you need insurance that covers the writing, so that libel and slander coverage of your liability. Workers' comp, if those employees are going to be working the event for you. So those are the top ones. How are you going to get to the event? Are your employees driving their cars? So there's all those things kind of fall into like having a marketing business. You kind of fall under a marketing consultant, and then obviously off of a concept like this, we can do a more of a customized. When I learn more about what kind of expo you're running, you might need some other types of coverages for there. You're going to get a copy of the recording. Yes, I know they said it was on YouTube, so they'll get that out to you. And then copy on YouTube. Day spas. Day spas are interesting because you do need special insurance for a day spa, especially if you are going to be doing like injections, and there's medical spas that need professional liability to cover those types of things. In addition to obviously thinking of a day spa where you've got your people are coming in the office, people are going to come in, that's general liability, that's your personal property for all your things. Then the massage therapists need insurance for their profession. Then you need workers' comp for those people that are working on your customers. So those are all the things that we talked about, those base things are part of that business insurance policy. So workers' comp, general liability, personal property, professional liability in a day spa's profession, because they're putting, things on their people's faces. They're, touching them they're giving advice on consulting. Massage therapists need professional liability as well, because they're exchanging a service. So whenever you're doing services, you need that professional liability. Etsy store reselling plants in an in-home plant store, reselling plants for maintenance, would that be property liability and general liability? Yes. If you're selling cannabis plants, there's different types of insurance for types of plants that you sell. But yes, plant coverage though, it's not going to cover if they died, right? But if there's a fire and your plants that would be considered part of personal property. And then if you're doing different types of selling like cannabis, there's different insurance for cannabis sales. But property liability, general, yes, yes, and yes. Good job on those questions. The YouTube channel, I'll let them answer that. Cyber, I'm not sure what that is. Oh, they'll link it. Okay. They're putting in, oh, you can't hear. I'm sorry. I hope you guys could hear me. Geez, I didn't see that part. If we have a college intern for the summer, are they considered under workers' comp? Yes. If you do internships, are considered employees, even if they're paid or unpaid. If that intern does get hurt, that intern is your responsibility. So that's why it's so important to have workers' comp. It's not expensive when you're just starting out, but an internship is technically considered in exchange for they're on your property, they are providing you a service, or they're learning from you. That person gets hurt, you're responsible for that person. Let's see. If all my contractors are out of state and we offer financial services virtually with limited client interactions, what insurance policies do I need for their activities? Those offering tax and accounting services, talking about potential clients at networking events, always professional liability when anything you're talking about, advice, remote employees offering services, that's number one, professional liability. So every contractor that you hire or bring in needs to carry professional liability, whether you ask that company, that person to show you a certificate of insurance, or you buy a professional liability covering everybody that's working under you. So, so definitely professional liability. If you're working at networking events, if you're hosting a booth, you'll need general liability to be part of that, participate. If you're just mingling at a mixer and you're at somebody's place, you don't need general liability for that situation, but you would need that professional liability kind of carries everywhere you go. So if whether you're talking at your office or you're working virtually, you're providing a service, whether it's remote, Zoom, any way we're speaking about it, it's considered a professional liability situation. Self-employed and have an LLC, do I need to have liability just for myself? So the LLC, it depends on what kind of work you're doing. My advice, my opinion is if you created an LLC, that means you're doing some kind of business, and that business needs insurance. I don't know what type of business you're doing that wouldn't require you to have insurance, but why are you opening an LLC unless you're trying to reduce risk? Because that's what it means. A limited liability, you're limiting your liability. So you have to be doing something, because people just don't open LLCs for no reason. So if I open an LLC because I own an apartment building, I need insurance for that apartment building. If I open an LLC because I'm providing consulting services on the side, then I need a professional liability for that LLC. So, and my instinct is telling me yes, but I don't know what business you have. And workers' comp, you are exempt if you are truly the only person that is in that business, in that LLC. The owner and officer of that business is considered exempt from workers' comp. Do you have bundle insurance, or do you have to pay, do you have separate policies? We have what's called a business owner's policy. For 80% of what I talked about can be bundled into what's called a BOP, business owner's policy. So your general liability, your property coverage, your crime, your signage, things like that, that can fall under a package, like a bundle, where it's called a business owner's policy. Some companies don't offer that, and then I'll have to a la carte it, but if your business is eligible, you can package it, which is what we would prefer because it's cheaper to do that. Workers' compensation is always a separate type of policy. Professional liability can be bundled sometimes onto that business owner policy package, and sometimes the insurance company doesn't offer it, so then it's got to be purchased separately. So depending on the risk, you can bundle, and it does save money by having what they call a package, business owner's package policy. And then you have your workers' comp that's separate, and then an umbrella policy is also separate. So at a minimum, you could have 3 policies that could cover the majority of what we talked about today. If you needed a bond, that's a separate policy. Depending on if the city wants it or the village, those are separately bought, but crime coverage would fall under a business owner's policy. So if it's available, and it makes sense, then that business owner policy is like the most bang for your buck. But if you don't need so many of those coverages, then it might be cheaper to buy just a liability policy. If your situation doesn't, you check the boxes like no, 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 then maybe we don't want to pay all that extra money to have that business owner policy if you don't fit in that criteria. Starting a nonprofit for mental health, definitely your nonprofits always need professional liability, general liability. Nonprofits, especially with mental health, there's coverage. It's kind of creepy, but there's coverage for molestation and sexual abuse and things like that. Unfortunately, that's more common in that type of business practice. So we offer, coverage like that for different situations. A lot of nonprofits are dealing with children and youths and things like that. So that molestation coverage is on there as an option, and it's just unfortunate. You have to be responsible for, everybody that comes involved into your facility, and not everybody is good. So there's coverage for that, as well as all those other things, workers' comp and all those things. But there's a special product for nonprofits, which provides coverage that I just talked about, in addition to other things as well. Thank you for the good information. I'm glad you guys enjoyed it. Short-term rental business, those are good. That's basic. There's a policy that we offer if you're doing an Airbnb or short-term rentals. They're not just it's not just a lesser's risk, what they call, or landlord policy. They're tailored to they're tailored to short-term rentals. And there's an inclusion in the policy that allows for short-term rentals. If you're opening a business and it's an apartment complex and you have annual leases, it's a different policy than short-term rental coverage policies. So it's all about removing exclusions. They might look the same. 2 policies say, okay, building coverage is 500,000, and then I've got 50,000 of business income, and that might look the same, but it's what is excluded on a regular landlord policy. When I buy a short-term rental product, that provides that includes the coverage versus excluded. So it is just making sure that you've got the right product for the right risk. And how do you know what you need? It's talking to a consultant and an advisor. Just like we don't know legal things if we're not an attorney. We talk and we expect our advisors to protect us and to give us information. But a lot of insurance agents are just not specialists enough. And if you asked for a commercial liability policy, somebody may only just give you what you asked for, general liability, and not disclose or not, give that extra step because you use that word loosely of general liability. It happens every day in my office. Every day a consumer calls in, I need general liability. It's just the words that they hear of, the attorney will say, and it's really the job of then an insurance advisor to make sure that you are well protected. And it's okay to say, no, you don't want a product, but it's not okay for not to know what the products are. Your job is to say, thank you for letting me know I'm interested in this and not this, or I'll hold off here. But to not know, it's a disservice. You know, when you're informed and you make that decision, it's you feel much more comfortable about the decision you made when you are in the driver's seat of being aware. Short-term rentals, moving companies, again, commercial auto, liability. There's workers' comp for the employees that are moving the vehicles. There's cargo coverage for those moving companies, whereas, you know, you're transporting people's items in your truck. Now that's called cargo coverage. So that coverage would be that add-on that you would need to cover that person's while it's in your care or custody. That's you know, you need to have that protection in that. And there are state laws on moving companies. You have to carry certain amount of coverage by law because there's so many scams that go on with moving companies. So you want to make sure you've got the right insurance on that. House plants and repotting. I think we talked about plants are part of a business. If it's your business and you're making money for it, you need insurance. You need the liability and contents if you're worried about the plants getting destroyed in fire or theft. Hot tub, well, so if you have a hot tub, I know you have to carry, it's still the same liability, but you have to post, there are things that you have to post to be in compliance. So, there's 10 things that says that you have to post in order for your liability policy to carry in. You know, if you have a heart condition, limit your time to 10 minutes, but it's not separate insurance for hot tub insurance. It's just, it costs more money to add liability for the hot tub, if that makes sense. So let's say if you were just a hair salon and that policy is $1,000, but now you're a spa that has a hot tub and a sauna, I just increased my risk so that same $1 million liability might cost you $2,000 because you have different risk than somebody that just has a hair salon. Same, it's called still liability, but there's questions on the application that when you answer them yes, it costs more money because they just are adding the cost to insure the risk, if that makes sense.
Are you paying for Zach's flight? His return flight? Oh, I gotta pay for that too.
Oh, you're still on speaker. I don't, you're still on,
Shit, they averaging $400.
okay, I'm not sure she understands, hears me. Okay, a remote intern,
Yep.
if they're overseas, I know this is getting a little more common. If your remote intern is overseas,
You can leave on
typically
either Sunday or Monday.
you don't need to carry their workers' comp because it's overseas and they're contracted through a third party
Okay,
and
that's
you're paying the
them Sunday
fees.
flight for like $400.
You're,
I'm looking on the website now.
this is annoying. Sorry. You're on whoever's on speaker.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. So you have to look at the contract that you sign and agree to if they're international. But if they're remote and they work for you in the US, you have to add them to your workers' compensation. It's a question on the application. And it goes by their payroll. So that's workers' comp is based on payroll and the type of business that you have. Somebody working in an office, that cost is much less than a roofing employee. So the cost depends on the type of risk. But typical, if you have an intern that's just office work, it's like maybe 20 cents per thousand of cover cost. So it's very inexpensive, couple $100 a year to insure, a $30,000 to $50,000 payroll was all what it costs if they're just doing clerical work for you. We talked about the liability. The scope of general liability is all the word general liability inside general liability. There's product liability, there's premises liability, there's personal injury liability, there's the professional liability. So, there are different facets of general liability. There's fire liability, fire legal. So inside that scope of it, you typically, when you buy general liability, you get several of those per person, per occurrence liabilities. Sometimes you'll get product liability with it. Sometimes it's excluded. Professional liability is extra. So like I said, the word general is premises, product, liability. It's the slip and falls and things like that. And it's also, if you're if you're at businesses to report things on the, in writing and you're marketing for something and you made an error, that liability can also be listed under, that legal liability that you may be responsible for. E-commerce store for jewelry, what insurance coverage should I have considering to be covered? Yes, so e-commerce store, just think if you're carrying inventory or are you just a rep that's, you're just the middle person that doesn't carry inventory. So if you have the inventory on hand, you need to carry insurance for the contents. When you're shipping the items, you need to have insurance for the items to be shipped. Who's going to pay for it if it's lost? Are you paying FedEx or are you paying, the company that's doing the traveling for you? That's the cargo part of it. Is that getting third partied out or are you doing it yourself? Are you, when you're doing e-commerce, are you having employees? Is it a home-based business? Even if you have a home-based business, there's still liability insurance that you buy. It's still general liability, even if it's a home-based business. Some home-based businesses can fall under a homeowner's policy, believe it or not. Depends, very low risk. Like if you're a realtor and you don't see clients at your house, you can add your LLC to a homeowner's policy. Our policy does allow that. The cheapest way to do that is obviously in your homeowner's policy, but we don't do, risky types of things on homeowners because the cost is only $25 or $50 to add business coverage onto your homeowner's policy. So that means for $50, it's got to be very low risk for insurance company to give it to you at next to nothing. So the higher the risk, the more that policy needs to be a separate policy because it may not cover it properly under just a homeowner's policy. Policies for partnering with suppliers. Yeah, so when you're partnering with suppliers, you may need the additional insured on their product. If you're relabeling your products and you're putting your own labels on there, now that product liability opens up for you and you open up for you to be responsible for when you relabel things or you hire a manufacturer, the manufacturer needs to make sure that they have that product liability. And then when you stick your label on it, you might need to carry your product liability to make sure that should somebody get sued across that product line, that everybody has the right coverage, everybody's additional insured. I know that when you receive items overseas, not a lot of insurance companies like that. So if you get your products from China, that might be a knockout, let's say, for some insurance companies because the products may not be made up to our code or our standard. So where you get your products from makes a difference on what insurance companies are going to offer a policy, and things like that. So I guess any more detailed on that, I would say offline on a separate meeting. We signed a lease for office downtown. We will be doing pop-ups with some inventory in hand. Yeah, we do a ton of pop-up coverage. That is just your general liability policy carries with you from location to location, and where you signed the lease is going to be where the named insured is going to be there at that lease location, and then the description of your operations will indicate us where you will be doing your pop-ups throughout the city and around town, and then we cover that coverage during that pop-up situation. So maybe you have $10,000 of inventory in that shop, we can provide you coverage for property, or if you're just worried about liability coverage, those are the two things if you're selling inventory on hand in and around Chicago, as well as workers' comp if whoever's working the pop-ups for you. If you're doing it on your own and you're the only person, you should be exempt from workers' comp from the city of Chicago. Workers' comp. I'm not sure I don't remember who that is. If I have time, I'll go back. Currently rideshare drivers. Okay, so rideshare drivers need rideshare coverage. You can have a personal auto policy and have rideshare as an endorsement, but if you have a commercial vehicle and you're listed as a limo, you can't be listed under a personal or a business. You have to go a commercial policy. And if you're renting a vehicle, there is insurance you don't own the vehicle, you are renting this vehicle, and with that rental vehicle, you are using it for rideshare. There's a special commercial auto policy for specifically that type of company, that type of business, because you technically don't own that vehicle, but you are leasing it. And so the lease company requires you to carry certain amount of limits of coverage, and then you add that rideshare endorsement, and then you'll be okay to drive that, to be legally covered. The lease will not let you drive off the lot without insurance, so they will make sure that you have the right coverage for when you're renting a car for rideshare. There's several leasing companies that specialize in renting the vehicles for rideshare purposes. So you may want to partner with that company, and help you with, with the coverages you need from that. So the moving companies we talked about, somebody asked about that already. Most important on moving companies is the commercial auto, the workers' comp, because employees get hurt all the time lifting furniture. And that's a workers' comp case. Classic back injuries happen, as well as accidents on the road. So workers' comp and the commercial auto is the most important. And then obviously coverage that is required, I think, to have a license to work is to have coverage for inside people. When you're taking their items and moving them, that value is your responsibility to a certain degree. So you want to make sure you have that cargo coverage as well. And general liability, right? So you got to have that too. General and professional is good enough for accounting firms. Yes. If there's no physical location, host events. If you're hosting events, unfortunately, you can buy a special event policy, which covers you for one day. But if you're doing more than 3 events a year, just buy a general liability policy. It will be cheaper than doing a special event policy. So, but they do exist. So if you're doing just 1 event a year, and that event might be, $300 to buy insurance for that one event. That might be cheaper than buying, $1,000, and then you have liability throughout the whole year, and it covers you everywhere you go. If you're listing your information properly on the policy, that should extend to every location, and then every location gets to be an additional insured on that policy. So that's your professional liability or your general liability. I'm glad you guys are enjoying it. Lots of good feedback. Workers' compensation, if all I have is contractors. So in the eyes of the law, that independent contractor is still your responsibility. You can get out of not having the workers' comp. You have to request that employee has to have workers' comp. We do this a lot with independent contractors. We can buy them or set them up with what they call a ghost policy. So that independent contractor doesn't have any employees. He's your tile guy, or they do drywall. You can buy a workers' comp policy that's called a ghost policy, no employees, no payroll. It's like $1,500 a year to buy it. And then if there are no employees, you get $600, $700 back of that premium because they credit it back. So that is an inexpensive way to get around not being responsible for all of that payroll. And so we help our contractors a lot by keeping their costs down and helping educate the independent contractor to buy. It's cheaper to buy the ghost policy than have the general contractor or the main insurance, the main customer pay for all of that payroll of that revenue, because that could get very expensive depending on what type of work they do. Glad it was helpful. Do I need workers' compensation? Yeah. So all the contractors, yes, we talked about that. So technically, yes. But if you can waive their requirement if they provide the proof of insurance, and there is an audit every year for having the workers' comp, and then the main owner buys a workers' comp policy and also says ghost employees, no employees. Every independent contractor has their own policy, and then everybody's paying a very low cost in situations where they're contractors. A couple more questions. Good guys are asking really good questions. Artist paints murals. Okay, so that's your general liability for your contents for your painting and your artwork. If you're teaching classes, now you're dealing with professional liability. So anytime you're offering a service, that's going to be your professional liability. If you're mobile, then you need coverage for getting your items, from the vehicle from point A to point B. You want to make sure you've got coverage for that. Professional, an example doing a professional development. Yes. So it's professional liability will extend to those operations that you go in and you do an educational event. It's kind of like a special event, but once you buy your professional liability, that we can add that situation while you're teaching or instructing, hosting events, things like that would all transfer over with that one policy for your professional and then one policy for your general liability. And if you have no employees, which it sounds like, then you're exempt from the workers' comp in that scenario. Okay, go. I'm glad as I'm going down, we could hear you speaking. Okay, good. Okay. Let's see. Could grant money be used for business insurance? I don't know that. I don't know what they can, that's a good City of Chicago question. I'm not sure what constitutes as expenses for the business for that. Do you have any packages for moving companies, moving services, meaning I provide movers to do moving, packing, so forth, to do the moving or packing? I don't own a truck. Oh, so you're just helping somebody move? Yeah, if you're just helping somebody move, then you're an independent contractor in that scenario. And we would just get you coverage, we would just get you, the homeowner may want to see that you have workers' comp because they may not want to be responsible if you get hurt in their home. So you may need the workers' comp showing ghost payroll. And then that protects you from that. And then general liability, if you break something, you know, that if while you're moving things for that person, if you break something, that's your general liability. So in that scenario, if you don't have a vehicle and you're not moving things, you're just helping them pack. Those are the two those are the two items that come to mind with boxing things up. General liability if you break something of theirs, and then workers' comp if you're on people's properties, they don't want to be responsible if you trip down the stairs. I'm glad everybody found it helpful. I think that is it. I don't see anything else. You guys asked really good questions. I enjoy helping people succeed in their businesses and be successful, and seeing people with, gleaming in their eyes for opening a business. Know that you're one of only like 3% of the population owns a business, and it's scary, and congratulations for stepping out and believing in yourself and doing it. I did it when I was 25, a very long time ago, and it was scary. So I've been in your shoes if you're new in business, and my business has done a lot of ups and downs, a lot of challenges with staffing and hiring, firing, just a lot of it, even with expansions. But so just know to rely on good people in your network, attorney, insurance, and a CPA. And that does help make sure that those things that are out of our known sight, that you're getting good advice for, so that way you make good decisions for your best interest of your business and your family. Thanks for having me. Thanks for spending this time with me. Again, you can find me locally here. Okay.
Thank you, Sandra, for today's presentation. Thank you to all of our attendees. This webinar was recorded and will be available on our YouTube page at youtube.com/Chicago BACP. If you are a part of our entrepreneurship program, you will receive credit for your attendance today within 24 hours. To learn more about our certificate program, please visit chicago.gov/BACP certificate. In order to receive a certificate, you must enroll in the program prior to registering for the webinars. So have a good weekend, and thanks again to Sandra.